Snark Squad. Babes, the vibes tonight are spooky. And babes, we are here for it.
We are so incredibly here for it. Like, I have honestly been vibrating at a frequency of pure, unadulterated dread all day.
Oh, same. Literally same. And if you are listening to this right now, I hope you have the lights dimmed because we are going to some very dark places tonight.
Oh, absolutely. We really are.
But to help with that, we've got the Aperol on deck. It is poured, it is glowing, that beautiful, slightly toxic neon orange color, and it is flowing.
Which is very necessary for my survival. And we are still trying to manifest a podcast sponsor, by the way.
Yes. So if anyone from Aperol's listening, babes, call us. We are doing the Lord's work, keeping your sales up.
Seriously. The sheer volume of this delightfully bitter Italian drink we consume while unpacking absolute television insanity, I mean, we are practically brand ambassadors at this point.
Literally, just send a case. Or a check. We're really not picky.
No, not at all. Just acknowledge our devotion to the craft of drinking it while spiraling over prestige horror.
Exactly. But more than anything, Snark Squad, we are just happy to be here.
We really are.
Even if we are a little bit, well, spooked.
I think we have every right to be spooked, honestly.
Yeah.
This week has tested my psychological limits, and frankly, my digestive limits, too.
It really has. We've been meaning to post this for a while. Like, we know you have been in our DMs screaming for us to unpack this show, but babes, the gore is a lot.
It's aggressive.
Like, a lot. I had to literally pause it, walk around my living room, take deep breath, and remind myself that it's all just, corn syrup and silicone.
Right.
I was literally watching through my fingers.
Okay, wait, I have to call you out on this right now, because I've been sitting on this thought for 3 days, and it's driving me insane. Aren't we both dentists?
Okay, yes.
No, let me finish. In our actual professional lives, we look inside people's bloody, inflamed mouths for a living. We do periodontal surgery.
That is completely different.
We extract impacted wisdom teeth while people are awake. How is this too much for you?
That's exactly why I'm a dentist. Because I cannot handle this level of unregulated, chaotic gore.
I don't understand the logic there.
You're completely missing the psychological mechanism here. When I am at work looking at a cracked molar, it is a tiny, contained, sterile environment.
Right, with your little mirror.
Yes. I have my mirror, I have the high-volume suction taking away the mess, it's controlled, I know the exact outcome.
So you went to dental school purely so you could operate in a 2-inch radius and lecture adults about flossing. I see.
It is about control. I didn't sign up to watch bodies being absolutely shredded while I'm trying to unwind in my cozy loungewear. A tooth is just a tooth.
I guess a routine extraction is slightly different than someone performing butcher-level acts, yeah.
Exactly. A root canal does not actively bleed out of its eyeballs while Paul Anka plays in the background.
Fair point. Still, I find it deeply hypocritical that you can drill into human enamel without blinking. But the second a Netflix show gets a little wet and squishy, you need an emotional support blanket.
I am protecting my peace. But babes, we are here for you, so we are locked in.
We suffer for the culture.
We do, and we are finishing this series. No matter how many times we have to look away, pause, and scream into a pillow.
Because the Snark Squad deserves the full, unfiltered breakdown of the absolute madness that is Summer House.
Always. But before we get into the absolute bloodbath of this family, we need to talk about ghosts.
Oh boy, here we go. The paranormal tangent.
No, listen to me. I need to share this because it explains so much about my fragile state. When I was 8 years old, I had this toy.
Okay.
It was one of those creepy, interactive things from the late 90s, kind of like a Furby, but worse. A weird little animatronic gremlin thing.
Those were objectively terrifying, yes.
Right. And my mom always made me keep it on the top shelf across the room because she said its eyes followed her.
Sensible woman.
Well, one night, I wake up at 3 a.m. The house is dead silent. You know that heavy, thick silence where you can hear your own heartbeat?
I know the acoustic properties of an empty house at night, yes.
And I hear the scraping sound. Scrape, scrape. It was plastic dragging on wood. I look over at the top shelf where it was wedged between 2 heavy books, and the toy is gone.
Okay, stop right there. The dog bumped the bookshelf. Gravity, a fundamental force of the universe, did its job.
Let me finish. I sit up in bed, terrified. I look at the floor. Nothing. I slowly look at the foot of my bed.
Don't tell me.
And that little animatronic demon is sitting right there, perfectly upright, on my blanket, staring at me.
Oh, wow.
It didn't fall. It was placed. Its eyes pop open, and the mechanical voice box goes, "I see you!" And then it just powered down.
Okay, that's...
The little motorized eyelids clicked shut. Dead silence. Babes, I did not sleep for a week.
I mean, objectively, the vibes of that story are terrifying. The imagery of the little plastic eyelids clicking shut in the dark. Horrifying.
Thank you. My parents told me I must have sleepwalked and moved it myself, but I know my own body. That thing navigated. That's the moment I believed in ghosts.
That is exactly why I refuse to buy antique furniture, and why I will never allow a doll with a microchip into my home. But analytically,
Yeah.
you definitely sleepwalked.
I did not.
Or the batteries were corroding, causing a microsurge that triggered the voice box, and it glitched and rolled off the shelf.
It did not roll. It traversed the room. It had intent.
Right. Well, this deep-seated childhood trauma is exactly why you are now so unhealthily obsessed with healing crystals.
You know what? Maybe it is.
You're just trying to retroactively ward off the ghost of a 1990s robotic toy? You think a chunk of amethyst is going to protect you from a microchip?
Honestly. Because, babes, we only want to attract peace, love, and drama, but only the fun kind of drama.
That's
like
true.
reality TV cheating scandals, not the demon toy at the foot of the bed drama.
Well, unfortunately for your crystals, you're certainly getting the cursed to family drama today.
I really am. But speaking of things that bring you peace and love, the app roll. Still hitting.
Highly effective.
But we need to pivot for just a second, because there is something crucial we have to discuss before we spiral into the darkness. We need to talk about dinner.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Babes, we had ribs tonight. And they were divine. I am talking an emotional, primal experience.
They really were spectacular. I was highly skeptical of that little spot you found, but they delivered on a molecular level.
They had this incredible, deep, smoky flavor. You could taste the cherry wood like they had been in the smoker since the crack of dawn.
The bark was excellent.
The bark on the outside was perfectly caramelized, slightly sweet from the brown sugar, but with this aggressive, peppery kick at the end. And the texture.
Incredible.
Fall off the bone doesn't even do it justice. The meat was basically surrendering. It was melting on the tongue.
It's a deeply primal act, honestly. There is something profoundly satisfying about reducing an animal to bone.
And the sheer chaotic satisfaction of messy eating. Literally tearing flesh from the bone with your teeth right before sitting down to record. Elite.
It actually gets you in the perfect psychological headspace to discuss the visceral tearing of flesh we are about to cover, really.
I have barbecue sauce in places I didn't know existed, and I don't even care.
But this brings up an incredibly important question, and I need you, the listener, to weigh in on this immediately.
Oh, here we go.
What are the best sides to have with ribs? Because we had an absolute meltdown in the kitchen over this an hour ago.
It wasn't a meltdown. It was me vigorously and passionately defending the culinary truth.
It was unhinged.
There are only two acceptable answers when you order barbecue, babes. Mac and cheese and french fries. That is it.
Your palate is so wildly childish, it honestly concerns me as a medical professional.
That is the holy trinity of a smokehouse pleat. Ribs, mac, fries, end of discussion.
Let's break down the chemistry of what you're suggesting. Mac and cheese is heavy, dairy-laden, and completely overwhelming.
It's comforting.
You are eating a massive pound of heavily sauced, highly fatty pork. If you pair that with a thick, viscous cheddar cheese sauce, you are just coating your palate in fat on top of fat.
You need the cheese.
You lose the nuance of the smoke. You need an acidic cut. The only correct sides for ribs are a really sharp, vinegary coleslaw and a perfectly baked cornbread to act as a sponge.
Coleslaw? Are you kidding me? Coleslaw is just sad, shredded cabbage drowning in a pool of mayonnaise.
I specifically said vinegar slaw.
It is the side dish you actively ignore at a family picnic. It sits in the sun and gets warm and depressing. You don't pair a masterpiece of a smoked rib with sad cabbage.
A proper Carolina-style vinegar slaw provides the necessary astringency to cleanse the tongue between bites.
And fries give you the salty, structural crunch that you desperately need.
Fries are a diner food. They are a fast food staple. They do not belong at a multi-hour barbecue. You are ruining the structural integrity of the meal.
You are ruining my life with this acidic coleslaw propaganda. Snark Squad, please back me up. Mac and cheese is mandatory.
I eagerly await the vindication of the comments. I know the refined members of our audience will understand the biological necessity of an acidic counterpoint to rendered pork fat.
Coleslaw is a punishment disguised as a vegetable.
Well, speaking of raw, messy meat, primal tearing, and absolute bloodbaths, it is time. We have to transition from the ribs to the slaughter.
Oh, God. It's time. I'm taking a sip.
We need to talk about the show that has completely consumed our waking thoughts, our social media timelines, and our psychological stability.
Yes. Let's get into it.
Let's unpack the absolute masterpiece of dread That is, Netflix's something very bad is going to happen.
I am already shaking. Babes, this show, it is an experience.
It really is.
It starts off feeling like a weird, slightly clunky family drama, and then it just rips the rug out from under you, sets the rug on fire, throws you into a pitch-black basement, and locks the door.
It really does. But I want to start with a bit of a structural critique, because I know the internet is heavily divided on the pacing.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Let's be brutally honest about the architecture of this season. The first 3 episodes of this show, they were a rough slog. They tested my patience on a molecular level.
I knew you were going to say this, and I completely, fundamentally disagree with you.
Hear me out. The show bills itself as this highbrow, elevated psychological horror. It promises Mike Flanagan levels of slow, deliberate, character-driven tension.
And they delivered exactly that. The tension was suffocating.
No, they didn't. Instead of earned psychological tension, we got cheap parlor tricks, so many loud bangs.
But that's the point.
The first 3 episodes relied so heavily on the cheapest, most bottom-of-the-barrel horror tropes from a decade ago. A door slams on its own. A string instrument screeches on the soundtrack to manufacture a jump scare.
It was setting the mood.
It felt completely disconnected from the narrative. I was sitting on the couch looking at you thinking, am I wasting my time with this? Is this just another generic North American Netflix thriller?
You are looking at it completely wrong. You are so focused on the mechanics of the scares that you are missing the emotional truth of what those scares represented.
Elaborate on that, because I just saw a lot of doors closing on their own.
The slow pacing isn't a flaw. It is brilliant, necessary psychological groundwork. It is mimicking the exact claustrophobia of entering a new, intimidating family.
Okay, that's an interesting angle.
Think about it. Camila Maroney as Rachel, she is an absolute powerhouse. She completely carried those first 3 episodes.
I will concede that Camila Maroney was a revelation. She outshined the script in those early hours.
Exactly. The palpable, paranoid dread that she was projecting from the minute she and Nikki started driving to Summer House was so visceral. It was that bone-deep feeling of impending doom.
Right.
And those cheap jump scares. That is exactly how anxiety feels. When you are in a heightened state of panic, a door closing does sound like a gunshot. A shadow does look like a monster.
The show was putting us firmly in Rachel's dysregulated nervous system.
Okay. That is a fantastic point.
Yes, and what I loved, what frustrated me but felt so real, is that Nikki keeps gaslighting her.
Played brilliantly by Adam DeMarco, by the way. He has perfected playing the sweet, naive, completely out of his depth wealthy boy. Totally.
Yeah.
And he keeps telling her, oh, you're just stressed about the wedding planning. But Rachel's irrational fears were actually spot on.
She was right all along.
The universe, the house, the atmosphere itself was screaming at her to run, and she felt it in her bones. But society conditions women to ignore their intuition, to be polite.
It captures that very specific, universal anxiety of assimilation. You are completely untethered from your own reality, trying to force yourself into their weird family dynamics.
Exactly.
And Summer House itself, this incredibly secluded, oppressive, old money estate, just acts as a pressure cooker that amplifies that isolation.
Yes. And let's talk about that family, because episode 3 is where the polite country club facade cracks and the chaos truly starts to bubble over.
The Cunninghams are the textbook definition of toxic wealth.
They are completely unhinged. I was absolutely spiraling over the grief therapy scene. It is a masterclass in awkwardness.
Oh, that scene was physically painful to watch.
So, Victoria, Nikki's mother, is actively dying, and no one in the family is acknowledging it. They are just rigidly pretending everything is fine while obsessively planning a wedding.
Right.
So Rachel, who is getting her doctorate in behavioral psychology, decides to force them to process their repressed grief.
Which is, clinically speaking, a terrible boundary-crossing idea.
Yeah.
Never psychoanalyze your future in-laws unprompted. It is a fast track to disaster.
It backfires so spectacularly. She has this wealthy, repressed family sitting in a circle on the floor in the dark with candles with their backs physically facing Victoria, the dying woman.
Unbelievable.
They make an effigy, a literal straw doll representing Victoria's impending death, and they burn it in a bowl. It is essentially a preemptive fake funeral.
Yes.
But here's the part that had me screaming at my television. In the middle of this profound, forced morning exercise, Rachel is literally going around the circle with a clipboard asking them chicken or fish for their wedding catering preferences.
See, that specific moment is brilliant writing. It elevates the show from a basic thriller to a sharp satire of the upper class.
It was so bizarre.
It is such a stark juxtaposition. You have this visual duality and this massive metaphor running through the entire episode. It's a funeral happening inside the logistical preparations for a wedding.
Right.
It's about mothers and children, beginnings and endings. Rachel is desperately trying to plan her future while forcing them to confront the end of theirs.
And they don't even care.
The fact that they just casually burn a doll representing their dying mother, wipe their hands, and then pivot seamlessly to debating catering options shows how profoundly emotionally detached these wealthy people are.
And no one manages that attachment better than Portia. Oh my God, Gus Burney playing Portia is the funniest, most terrifying part of this entire show.
She is an absolute icon of Wes's passive aggression.
She is incredible.
If they made a Portia spinoff, I would watch every episode. Her true version of horror wouldn't be ghosts or blood curses. Her horror would just be interacting with the middle class at a public airport.
Yes. She weaponizes classism like a scalpel. When she corners Rachel and tells her she couldn't find a digital trail for her.
Just openly, aggressively suspicious that Rachel isn't on Instagram.
Implying she must be hiding some dark, impoverished secret. And then she just casually uses her own stress as an excuse to hurl these cutting insults at Rachel's background.
And Rachel, bless her eager to please heart, just absorbs the abuse.
She smiles and asks Portia to be her maid of honor. And Portia just stares at her and doesn't answer. She just lets the silence hang there, the shade.
It's hilarious, but it's deeply tragic. It highlights Rachel's dangerous desperation to be accepted. She is willing to be abused to secure a seat at the table.
She ignored so many red flags.
But if you want to talk about red flags,
Yeah.
we have to pivot to the scene that truly made my skin crawl, the bathtub scene.
Oh my God, Jules and Nell, I physically recoiled.
Jules, played by Jeff Wilbush, who is just exuding this toxic, brooding menace the entire time, and Nell, who is supposed to be family, right?
Yeah, they were all gathered at the house.
Nell interrupts Jules while he's trying to take a relaxing candlelit bath. They get into this incredibly heated, venomous argument about the wedding.
And then it just escalates so fast.
The tone shifts drastically, and Jules physically grabs Nell and forces her to simulate drowning him in the tub.
It was so deeply uncomfortable. The power dynamics, the weird psychosexual tension between these family members, the sudden burst of violence.
And Rachel just happens to stumble upon this.
She hears this struggle, this desperate gasp for air. She peeks through the crack in the door and realizes these people are completely, fundamentally broken.
Someone on the Reddit thread for this episode actually pointed out that Nell and Nikki used to date.
Yes, user JoyShan13 posted that, which just adds an entire other layer of gross, wealthy family mess to the whole thing. It's like they just recycle trauma and partners within the estate walls.
The bathtub scene is vital narrative architecture. It strips away the polite country club facade. It shows the sheer cruelty these people are capable of behind closed doors.
Playing eroticized games with life and death.
Which is a terrifying precursor to what death is actually coming to do to them. But as disturbing as the psychological warfare in the bathtub was, it pales in comparison to the absolute sensory nightmare in the basement.
Babes. The moist dog.
The moist dog.
Yeah.
I have watched decades of horror cinema. I have never seen anything quite like the auditory and visual repulsion of the moist dog, and I hope I never do again.
I lost my mind. The Snark squad online was losing its collective mind. My Twitter feed was just all caps, screaming.
It was a collective trauma.
So the episode opens from this creepy POV shot. Someone is sneaking around the summer house estate at night, breathing heavily, and they stumble upon Boris, the patriarch of the Cunningham family,
Standing alone in a dimly lit, dungeon-like basement room.
doing taxidermy on a dead dog.
And we must clarify, not just any dead dog.
What?
A freshly deceased golden retriever.
It was so fresh. User locked outside Melmy Brain on Reddit literally posted a screenshot and captioned it, "No taxidermist, but why is doggo moist?"
And it was.
The lighting caught the sheen of it. It was glistening with bodily fluids. And Boris is just casually, methodically pulling the skin and fur off the dog's skull like he's removing a tight, wet sweater.
Like it was a rubber Halloween mask.
It wasn't meticulously detached with a scalpel. It just slid off with this horrific, wet, squelching sound. Squelch.
Let's analyze why that scene is so profoundly disturbing, beyond just the gross-out factor. Taxidermy is a highly specialized sterile art form. It requires clinical detachment.
He is not a taxidermist.
Exactly. Boris is a grieving, deeply controlling man who is desperately trying to freeze time. Think about the metaphor here.
Oh, what?
We talked about the funeral inside the wedding. This is the ultimate expression of the Cunningham family ethos. They are obsessed with preserving a flawless, beautiful exterior, a golden retriever, while the inside is rotting, dead, and hollowed out.
I was yelling at the screen, "Why are you doing this? Put the dog's face back on." It was so unnecessary for a non-professional to be doing that in a residential basement.
It felt like a violation. It shows a deep, rot-level sociopathy. He wants to control the aesthetics of death.
But yes, the execution of that scene, the squelch, the glistening tissue, was deeply upsetting.
And this is what the show does. It bombards you with these weird, unsettling moments in the first 3 episodes to disorient you. But then we hit episode 4.
The game changer. The masterpiece.
Episode 4, titled The Witness, is quite frankly one of the best episodes of television I have seen all year.
Completely agree.
This is where the slow burn finally ignites. This is where every single frustrating jump scare is instantly recontextualized into absolute narrative brilliance.
I was emotionally compromised for the entirety of episode 4, from the very first frame.
The aspect ratio shifts.
The film grain kicks in. We flash back to January 1997. We are watching found footage on a shaky VHS tape, and suddenly, panning across the screen, Victoria Pedretti is there.
The internet broke. And rightly so. Casting Victoria Pedretti as Rachel's mother, Ali, was a stroke of absolute genius.
It really was.
First of all, she and Camilla Morone genuinely look so believably alike, it's uncanny. But more importantly, Victoria just brings this instant, heartbreaking vulnerability to everything she does.
I screamed when she popped up. I am such a massive fan of hers, from The Haunting of Hill House, from Bly Manor, from You.
She's amazing.
But babes, the running joke on the Reddit thread, which is so true and so deeply sad, is that Victoria Pedretti never survives a Netflix show.
She is the patron saint of tragic television deaths.
The minute she smiled at that camcorder in 1997, I looked at you and I said, "Oh, you are in danger, girl. You are not making it out of this hour."
Her presence alone acts as a metatextual death omen. You know, tragedy is imminent.
And the found footage format was masterfully done.
It was shot by Jay, Rachel's father, leading up to their elopement. They're driving through upstate New York in the freezing snow.
And it's so eerie because the footage skips, the VHS tracking lines warp the image, the audio drops out slightly. You feel the intense claustrophobia of that car.
And we start to get the lore. This is where the mythology opens up.
They are driving through the exact same area where Summer House is located.
And they pull over to stop at that creepy roadside custard shop, Coldy's. The exact same one Rachel found, abandoned and rotting in the present day in episode 2.
And the teenage worker serving them ice cream is Larry, the notorious serial killer Nikki was casually telling Rachel about in episode 1.
The guy who eventually killed 3 women.
And Ollie, Rachel's mom, is heavily pregnant with Rachel, and she immediately gets this terrible sinking feeling she won't eat the ice cream.
She tells Jay they need to leave the shop immediately because her gut is screaming that Laurie's going to poison the custard.
She is incredibly intuitive. But more than that, she is experiencing the exact same paranoid dread that Rachel experiences in the present day.
And that's the brilliance of episode 4's structure. It shows us that Rachel's fear at Summer House isn't just wedding jitters or social anxiety. It is epigenetic trauma.
Yes.
It is a biological warning system passed down through the DNA from her mother.
Ali even says in the tape that she's been having these dark, suffocating dreams about the snowy cabin they are heading to.
And dreams of a grown-up Rachel she hasn't even met yet. She knows something terrible is coming, but she can't stop the momentum of the wedding.
It broke my heart. She was trying to warn a daughter who hadn't even been born yet. It is the ultimate tragedy of motherhood, knowing you can't protect your child from the future.
And then the wedding day happens.
They go to a tiny, empty church, they say their vows, they get married, and some creepy stranger films it for them. Ali is looking gorgeous in her vintage wedding dress.
But as they walk down the aisle, the camera skips, and for just a microsecond, a single frame, you see Ali's face completely covered in blood.
It is a blink and you miss it jump scare, but it is a horrific premonition.
They go back to their snowy, isolated cabin in the woods to celebrate. Just the two of them. It's romantic, it's quiet. They are completely cut off from the world.
They are slow dancing in the living room to Paul Anka's "Put Your Head on My Shoulder."
It's supposed to be this beautiful, intimate moment of newlywed bliss.
And then Ollie's nose starts bleeding.
It doesn't just bleed. A nosebleed is a trickle. This starts profusely gushing, like a faucet was turned on inside her skull.
It's pouring out of her nose, ruining the white dress, and then horrifyingly, it starts pouring out of her eyes.
She is actively crying thick, viscous tears of blood.
Within seconds, she is standing in a literal pool of her own blood on the hardwood floor. It is so intense, so fast, and so terrifying.
The stark contrast of the sweet, crooning 1950s romantic Paul Anka music playing while this beautiful woman is violently hemorrhaging to death in her wedding dress is an image that is permanently seared into my brain.
It is the death of romantic idealism.
And this is where the show takes a hard, sharp left turn into pure, unadulterated medical horror, and also where the logic of trauma completely breaks down.
She collapses. She is dying rapidly. Her organs are failing.
And she looks up at Jay and gasps, "You have to tell her," referring to the unborn Rachel.
And Jay absolutely loses his mind. Babes, I was screaming at the television. I was pacing the living room. I had to put my drink down because my hands were shaking.
Analytically speaking, Jay's reaction is the most insane, primal, and deeply legally questionable decision in television history.
Literally.
His wife collapses, bleeding from her ocular cavities. He doesn't look for a landline. He doesn't call 911. He doesn't run out into the snow for help.
No.
He assesses the situation for approximately 4 seconds, decides his wife is a lost cause, and immediately realizes he has to save the baby before lack of oxygen kills it.
And as a dentist, as someone who understands human anatomy, who understands the concept of a sterile surgical field, I need to emphasize how horrifying what happens next is.
He grabs a random knife from the kitchen counter.
Not a scalpel.
Yeah.
A serrated, unsterilized kitchen knife. And he rips open her wedding dress, and he proceeds to give his barely dead, possibly still conscious wife a bare-handed C-section on the filthy floor of a cabin.
All while sobbing hysterically and chanting, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over again like a mantra.
Do you understand the sheer physical force required to breach a human abdomen with a kitchen knife? You have to cut through the epidermis, the thick layer of adipose tissue, the tough connective fascia of the linea alba, the muscle, the peritoneum, and finally the uterus itself.
Without nicking the bowel.
Without severing a major artery, the sheer panic of it, the gore, the sound design of the tearing flesh, that wet ripping noise, I felt faint.
It touches on this deep, historical, primal terror of women losing total bodily autonomy in childbirth. She became nothing but a vessel to be cut open.
It is a profoundly disturbing sequence.
But the narrative payoff of that scene is what elevates the entire series from a shock fest into a masterpiece of plotting. Because earlier in the show, back in the slow first episodes, we hear the Cunningham family casually talk about this local urban legend called the Sorry Man.
A mythical boogeyman in the woods who supposedly murders people.
And we find out the truth. And it blew my mind into a million pieces.
We find out that little Jules, Jeff Wilbush's character, the toxic guy from the bathtub, had run away from Summer House as a child.
He wandered through the snow and ended up hiding under the bed in that exact cabin on that exact night in 1997.
He was hiding under the bed when Ollie collapsed. Ollie actually saw his little face hiding in the dust ruffles, and her last dying words were, "Tell her it's real," and "Are you sure he's the one?"
And then little Jules watches from under the bed as a frantic, blood-soaked man chanting, I'm sorry," carves open a woman's stomach with a kitchen knife and pulls out a screaming baby.
Jules didn't know they were married. He didn't know she was dying of a supernatural hemorrhage. To a terrified, freezing child hiding under a bed, it looked like a literal maniac just murdered a woman in cold blood to steal her baby.
The entire Sorry Man urban legend, this terrifying ghost story that haunted the Cunningham family and the entire town for decades, was just a traumatized kid misunderstanding a horrific, desperate medical tragedy.
That reveal was a masterpiece. My jaw was literally on the floor.
It is brilliant storytelling architecture. It takes a supernatural trope, the local boogeyman, and grounds it in a deeply tragic, entirely human misunderstanding.
It weaves the mythology perfectly.
And it logically explains why Jules is so deeply damaged, toxic, and full of rage in the present day. He has been carrying the crushing psychological weight of witnessing what he thought was a brutal murder his entire life. He grew up thinking the world is a slaughterhouse.
It's so deeply sad. And the fact that Rachel is watching this horrific VHS footage in the present day because her dad, the sorry man himself, who kidnapped her from Summer House just to force her to watch this tape, is trying to warn her.
He tells her the dread she feels is real. It's not anxiety, it's a warning.
And he tells her that if she goes through with the wedding and marries Nicky Cunningham, she will die exactly like her mother did.
And this revelation leads Rachel to the dive bar in town. She goes to confront the creepy, silent old man who has been lurking in the background of all her scenes.
The same man who held the camera at her parents' wedding in 1997.
The guy who hasn't aged a single day in almost 30 years.
The immortal man, the witness. Babes, when she walks into that dark, smoky bar and he is sitting there and the jukebox is playing that same Paul Anka song, chills. Literal chills all over my body.
The dread was suffocating. The bar scene is crucial. It is where the dense mythology of the curse is finally laid bare for the audience.
The old man explains the origins.
Hundreds of years ago, his great-great-great-grandparents were parted right before their wedding day. The groom died, the bride was devastated, driven mad by grief. She begged Death, the actual entity of death, to bring her groom back.
And Death, being the ultimate trickster entity who operates on monkey paw logic, agreed, but with a massive generational caveat.
Death said he would bring the groom back to life only if the bride truly, in her soul, believed he was her one true soulmate, and she agreed. She was young and naive, so she made the deal.
And because of that deal, Death placed a genetic curse on her bloodline forever. Think of it as a supernatural, dormant genetic virus.
Every single child that originated from that union carries the virus, and the environmental trigger that activates the virus.
A wedding. They are forced to find their one true soulmate.
If they marry someone who is not their absolute, cosmically ordained soulmate, the virus activates, and they will die a horrible, painful, rapid death shortly after the wedding. Just like Ollie did.
It is so incredibly bleak. The pressure, and the old man in the bar, he explains why he is immortal. He tried to cheat the system.
He was supposed to marry a woman named Marianne, but he got terrified of the curse, terrified he might choose wrong and die, so he backed out and left her at the altar.
Because he broke the deal with Death, Death cursed him with immortality. He is forced to wander the earth forever, acting as the witness.
He has to attend every single wedding in the infected bloodline and watch the tragedy unfold over and over again. He has watched generations of people bleed out in their wedding clothes.
And Marianne. She ended up marrying a man named Thomas Harkin, which started Rachel's family line. Rachel carries the virus.
It's a fascinating, terrifying construct. The curse doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care if you think you're in love. It doesn't care if you've been to couples therapy.
It is absolute binary cosmic law. You are either soulmates or you die.
And the witness slides a marriage license across the bar to Rachel. Only her name is filled out. She has to make a choice.
The psychological pressure of that blank marriage license, I would have passed out on the bar floor. He tells her she has 2 days until the wedding.
If she marries Nikki, and Nikki is her true soulmate, she lives happily ever after. If he isn't, she dies bleeding out from her eyes just like her mom.
But if she backs out, if she runs away and cancels the wedding, the curse jumps. Like a virus mutating. It leaves her family line and immediately infects the groom's family.
It infects the entire Cunningham bloodline. Which brings us to the devastating finale. And we are going full spoilers here, Snark Squad, so if you haven't watched the final episode, skip ahead 3 minutes.
But we have to talk about the bloodbath.
The finale completely broke my heart.
So Rachel, who has spent her whole life trying to fix things, decides to sacrifice herself. She decides to go through with it. She convinces herself Nikki is her soulmate.
They have the beautiful, lavish summer house wedding. They say their vows. They seal the deal.
And then Rachel dies. She drops dead. Nikki wasn't her soulmate. She chose wrong. I was screaming at the screen.
I threw a throw pillow at my television.
I couldn't believe the writers actually had the guts to kill off the main character.
It was a wildly bold narrative choice, and it proved this wasn't a standard thriller. But the tragic, snarky irony of what happens next is what elevates the finale to a Shakespearean tragedy.
Because Rachel dies, which means the curse is fulfilled for her, right?
But the vows were legally and spiritually spoken. The connection between the two bloodlines was made. So death doesn't just stop with Rachel. The virus crosses over.
It turns out practically no one in the Cunningham family was actually married to their soulmate. The entire family structure was built on lies, convenience, and settling for wealth.
Exactly. The virus activates simultaneously across the estate. Death sweeps through Summerhouse and wipes out almost the entire Cunningham bloodline in a matter of minutes.
Aunts, uncles, cousins, all bleeding out in their evening wear.
And most devastatingly, Jules and Nell. They were married. And clearly, despite all that intense, toxic, bathtub drowning role play and obsessive attachment, they were not soulmates either.
All of that drama, all of that posturing for a completely sham marriage, death takes them both.
It was a massacre. The camera panning over the bodies in the ballroom. Nikki is just left standing there alone in his tuxedo, completely devastated, looking at the corpses of his relatives.
Realizing his entire family was a facade. And then the final twist. The twist that had me running to the kitchen to pour 2nd April immediately.
The camera zooms in on Rachel's lifeless body, and her eyes open. she resurrects.
But we need to be clear, she doesn't beat the curse. That's the crucial distinction that makes the ending so dark.
No, she didn't beat it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because the immortal witness, the old man from the bar, he finally fulfilled his duty. The original bloodline is essentially ended. He gets to die.
But the cosmic rules state the curse needs a new witness to watch the remaining survivors. Specifically, little Jude, the child in the family who is now infected with the curse for the next generation.
So death brings Rachel back to life, not as a reward for her bravery, but as a punishment for her hubris. She is the new immortal witness.
She is trapped forever to wander the earth, never aging, forced to watch the curse continue to ravage the next generation.
It is a devastating, cynical ending. The TV Fanatic review summed it up perfectly. It's a double-edged sword. Rachel traded her choice, her autonomy, for an eternity of witnessing other people's fatal mistakes.
She warned Jude at the end to be very, very careful who he marries, but it's a warning from a traumatized woman that will likely be completely forgotten by the time he grows up.
The cycle of generational trauma just continues unabated. It's a deeply pessimistic, dark ending that completely stuck the landing.
And I'm still shook. I am genuinely still reeling from the emotional weight of it. Which perfectly brings us to segment 1, the most disturbing moment.
Because we have unpacked a massive amount of trauma tonight, but we need to declare a winner. What specific image is going to haunt your nightmares when you close your eyes?
Do you really have to ask? We've already laid the groundwork for this debate. I'm going first. For me, without a shadow of a doubt, it is the bloody, bare-handed C-section in the cabin.
I figured you'd pick that.
I will never, ever get the image of Jay ripping open that beautiful vintage wedding dress out of my brain. As a medical professional, the total lack of sterility, the brutal force of the serrated knife, the sheer frantic panic of a husband mutilating his wife.
The visual of Victoria Pedretti crying blood.
The fact that the upbeat, romantic Paul Anka song was playing in the background while this horrific surgical butchery was happening. It was sensory overload. It triggered every single fight or flight response in my body. It is the ultimate nightmare of losing control of your own body.
Analytically, I completely understand why that scene broke you. It is high-octane terror, it attacks your medical training and your empathy simultaneously. But for me, the most disturbing moment was much quieter, much more insidious. It was the moist, freshly dead golden retriever being skinned in the basement by Boris.
Babes, why did you have to bring the dog up again? I was just recovering.
Because it is fundamentally more disturbing on a psychological level. The C-section, horrific as it was an act of extreme, desperate love. It was a man trying to save his child in the face of a supernatural medical anomaly he couldn't comprehend.
There is a twisted, frantic logic to it, I guess.
But Boris skinning that dog.
Yeah.
There is no love there. There was no logic. It was visceral, it was gross, and it was completely unnecessary. He's not a professional taxidermist preserving a memory.
He's a monster.
He is a wealthy patriarch hiding in a dark room, peeling the wet face off a family pet to assert dominance over death. It speaks to a deep, rot-level sociopathy and a need for control that is far more terrifying to me than a frantic, bloody bird.
A sound design, the squelch of the fascia detaching. That is what will stay with me forever.
I am gagging. I am literally taking a sip of my drink to wash away that description. You win. That is definitely psychologically grosser. Let's move to segment 2 quickly to cleanse my palate. Did we actually like it?
I think we need to be very honest here. This isn't a show for everyone. I will go first. I admit, the gore had me looking through my fingers. I complained loudly to you on the couch, and I complained often.
You did, very loudly.
But babes, I absolutely loved it. Once the messy family drama kicked in, once the layers of wealth and privilege were peeled back and the generational trauma was revealed, I was hooked.
The Victoria Pedretti cameo was the turning point that locked you in.
It really was. I love messy family dynamics, I love dark secrets, and I love a tragic, doomed romance. It gave me everything I wanted out of a story, even if it made me profoundly nauseous in the process.
I will give it a slightly more cynical but honest review. As I stated earlier, the pacing and structure in the first 3 episodes were deeply fundamentally flawed. It tested my patience, and it relied too heavily on cheap tricks to keep the audience awake.
But episode 4, though.
Exactly. The way episode 4 arrived and completely recontextualized all of those cheap jump scares into a brilliant, sprawling genetic tragedy was top-tier storytelling. It is incredibly rare for a television show to justify a slow burn that well.
And we both agree Camila Morona carried the entire series on her back.
Her performance elevated a sometimes clunky script tenfold. So yes, ultimately I highly respect what the creators achieved, even if I loathe the journey to get there.
Exactly. The destination was worth the bumpy ride. Okay, segment 3, which is my absolute favorite game to play when we watch horror. Would we survive this?
Oh, this is easy. We have entirely different survival strategies.
If we were dropped into the middle of this specific soulmate or die curse, what happens to us? I am telling you right now, I would survive. Not because I am brave, but because I'm a petty queen with strict boundaries.
Very true.
The second, and I mean the literal second, Portia made that snobby, passive-aggressive comment about my Instagram presence or judged my clothes. I would have packed my bags, marched out to the driveway, driven my car right back down that snowy mountain, and entirely avoided the curse.
You wouldn't even make it to the rehearsal dinner.
I would refuse to stay at Summer House. You cannot curse me if I am not at the venue. I would be safe at home, drinking Aperol, organizing my crystals, and ignoring their calls.
That is entirely accurate. Your absolute intolerance for wasp passive aggression would literally save your life. As for me, I would survive easily, but for a completely different, much more intellectual reason.
Do tell.
If I were cursed to die, unless I married my true, cosmically ordained soulmate, I'm safe. Because I am far too sarcastic, hyper-analytical, and deeply cynical to ever blindly believe in the concept of a soulmate in the first place.
You would literally try to negotiate with the entity of death.
I would read the fine print on the marriage license, look at the immortal old man in the bar, realize the statistical improbability of finding one perfect person out of 8 billion humans on Earth, and simply choose to stay single.
You'd pull out the license and be like, actually, per Section 4, Paragraph B of this cosmic curse, I opt out of the institution of marriage entirely.
Exactly. I would find a legal loophole in the supernatural contract. Death respects a well-argued boundary. I would happily become the quirky, unmarried, perfectly alive aunt who just watches everyone else make terrible choices.
You really are a menace. All right, finally, segment 4, our final theory or take. When you strip away the blood, the moist dogs, and the ghosts, what does this all actually mean? What is the thesis statement of the show?
If we synthesize everything we've discussed today, the visual duality of funerals inside weddings, the toxic family secrets, the biological rules of the curse, the core theme of the show becomes starkly clear.
Let's hear it.
The horror isn't really about a supernatural entity or a boogeyman in the woods. It's a brutal, unforgiving psychological meditation on marriage as a self-perpetuating trap.
Wow.
It uses the extreme, gory metaphor of a death curse to show how ordinary people blindly enter into lifelong commitments because it's socially expected of them, because they want the status of the wedding, without truly, deeply examining if they are with the right person.
And the social system enforces itself endlessly, leaving massive psychological casualties in its wake. That is incredibly dark, but it is so chillingly accurate.
It is.
And to build on that brilliant point, I think it's also about the terrifying realization that these picture-perfect, wealthy families, like the Cunninghams, are entirely built on a foundation of rot and lies.
Yes, the generational debt.
The choices we make, the secrets we desperately keep just to maintain a flawless public image, they don't just disappear into the ether, they become genetic. They enforce a cycle of trauma on the next generation.
Jules was traumatized by a lie he believed was true. Rachel was haunted by a truth she wasn't allowed to know.
The show is telling us that the past always, always comes back to collect the debt.
It's a phenomenal, terrifying exploration of generational debt. And that, unfortunately, brings us to the end of our unpacking of the darkness today, Snark Squad.
What an absolute journey it has been. Spooky vibes, high-stakes Aperol energy, deeply personal food debates about the integrity of coleslaw.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over while you lie in bed trying to sleep tonight.
I'm scared.
When you look at the absolute devastation of that finale, you have to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. Is the true horror of the show the supernatural, bloody curse of death itself? Or is it the crushing, mundane realization that the person you're standing next to at the altar, the person you promised your entire life to, might not actually be your soulmate at all?
Babes, you cannot end the show like that. You are going to cause actual real-life breakups with that outro. That is terrifying. People are going to be looking at their fiancés tonight sweating.
It's the Snark side. We don't do comforting. We ask the hard, uncomfortable questions.
We really do. Snark Squad, we need to hear from you immediately to decompress from this. Hit up the comments. Slide into our DMs. Do you believe in unseen forces and ghosts like I do?
Could you handle the visceral, medical gore of this show? Or are you covering your eyes through the C-section scene like me?
And most importantly to my emotional well-being right now, what are your go-to rib sides? Validate my mac and cheese truth. Tell my co-host that fries belong at a barbecue.
Please, for the love of culinary science, validate my vinegar coleslaw logic. Show me that our audience has a refined palate. And while you're at it, down in the comments, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.
It feeds the algorithm, it appeases the corporate overlords, and it keeps our April glasses full so we can keep doing this.
And keep sending in your shady, snarky, or stupid personal stories and submissions for us to read on the next episode.
Yes, we love reading your mess. And do us a huge favor, send this link to one friend who loves spooky chaos, messy reality TV energy, and overanalyzing pop culture. Thank you, as always, for being the best part of the squad. We love you guys so much.
Stay spooky.
Stay messy.
And we'll see you next time on the Snark side.
Because honestly, babes, even when the muddy waters of a cursed family bloodline are swirling around us, the only thing scarier than the ghosts under the bed is marrying the wrong person. Bye!